Welcome home, sweet home. And now back to the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome home, sweet home. I am your host, Calvin Parker Jr. I'd like to welcome Mr. Paul Sutton with Peak Structural. How you doing, Paul?
Great, Calvin. Thanks for having me on today.
Oh, man. Hey, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. Like we were talking off air, the whole objective of this show is we just want to inform and educate our listeners on various services and products that are offered out there that people might not know a lot about. It's great with today's digital world and Google and Yelp and reviews and Facebook and what have you. But I think really going to the source itself and asking the questions and having you explain it really helps people get a true picture of what services are offered or what they might need or might not know about certain services. Does that make sense?
It sure does.
All right. So first of all, let's tell people what services Peak Structural offers, and then we'll talk a little more about in detail.
Sure.
So
we're known first and foremost as a structural repair specialist, and by that we mean that foundation repairs, both for residential properties as well as light commercial structures, are really our bread and butter. And so here in Colorado, we've got a lot of very active soils, and sometimes things can get moving with a home or a building, and you can get structural damage from shifting soils. So that service of permanently stabilizing or re-leveling a foundation is really what we're known for, probably first and foremost. But there are a few other things we do that are closely related and are becoming really increasingly popular. That second service I'm thinking of would be concrete slab lifting and leveling. So when folks have problems with those trip hazards forming on a sidewalk or a driveway,
the uneven slabs or
right,
which you see a lot in the older homes. I know I had a older home and same thing. I had like the four. I don't know the term exactly, but the slabs. The joints. So
right. It can happen in older homes, but sometimes surprisingly, it can happen in quite recently built homes as well. For reasons of compaction of the soil or what have you. So there's concrete leveling. And then this year, with all the rain that we've been having up and down the Front Range, we've been getting a lot of calls for basement waterproofing. This is a service that we provide, which is closely related to the foundation and the structure of the home. And we can install a system that will permanently keep the basement dry. And that's really important, of course, when folks want to either store things down there, or even more so when they finish the basement and want to have livable space that they don't have to worry about mold and mildew, growing in because of too much humidity in the air or actually the presence of water, on the basement slab. So there's basement waterproofing, and the fourth main service, Calvin, is crawl space encapsulation. And so that's a process of isolating a home from the earth beneath it for those homes that are built over dirt crawl spaces, so that we can cut down on the humidity that, again, creates mold and mildew. We can seal out insects, rodents, all of that with our crawl space encapsulation system.
Okay. So let's start with that one. So is it like your barrier? Is it I'm assuming that type, is it usually just a barrier, vapor barrier that you put down in the crawl space? Or
you could say it begins there, but it really involves a lot more than that. In crawl spaces that have had active water pooling up in them, the first thing we've got to do is put in a drainage system and a sump pump so that we no longer have water leaking in and sitting there underneath the house. So the drainage system is the very first component of the system.
Makes sense, because you're just putting like a vapor barrier down or plastic down. It's just keeping it locked in there. It's not really resolving the problem.
Exactly.
Okay.
So then the second step is to insulate. And so we've got products designed specifically to apply directly over the soil in the crawl space on the floor. And another product we call Silver Glow that installs on the interior wall of a crawl space, right against the foundation wall. So the insulation is the second step, and then the third step is the actual liner itself. And this is not a thin roll of plastic that we pick up at a big box home improvement store. This is a very, very thick, tear and puncture resistant, 20 mil thick liner that's designed specifically for this. And so that's really the final step that goes in, is to lay the liner over the insulation and up the walls and seal, all the moisture and bugs and everything else out from the rest of the house.
The rest of the house. Okay, so it's a process. It's like a 3-step, as opposed to
Correct.
Just like you said, running down to the hardware store, getting some 10 mil plastic and putting it down and thinking that's good. Not the case.
Right. That usually lasts until the very first time somebody goes crawling down there to change a furnace filter or fix a plumbing leak or something, and it gets all rumpled up and torn. And it's that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something that comes with a lifetime warranty. It's a very durable system, and one that makes a dramatic difference in the usability of the crawl space for storage. You can now, you can store seasonal items or whatever down there and not worry about them getting wet.
Which is key, and then, because most people in their storage, that's what you have in there, right? You have your boxes.
Yeah, you put your Christmas stuff down there.
In there, cardboard boxes, stuff that if it gets wet, it's...
Yeah, you put maybe your winter clothes down there in the summer or whatever, and a dirt crawl space is just a horrible environment to put anything of any value and expect that it's not going to be ruined. So,
I got you.
So getting that extra storage space is kind of an added bonus to the whole
crawl
system.
Space. Yeah, I mean, if you have a crawl space, you might as well utilize it. What would you say? What are some of the signs to look for people that might need that, crawl space repair? Or I know you said earlier, standing water, definitely mold, mildew.
Well, sure. So there are a few things, Calvin. The first thing that a lot of times people will notice if they've got a lot of moisture down there is that on the main floor of the house, just above that crawl space, they'll get mildewy, moldy smells. And the reason for that is because at least 50% of the air on the main floor of a home that has a crawl space comes up from the crawl space. So there, you're going to smell that mustiness, that nastiness.
Not just in the crawl space, but actually through.
Well, you'll smell it in the main living space of the house,
area, right?
Because of that, what we call the stack effect. That those smells and odors and moisture comes up through the floor of the house. And then convective forces want it, to rise up, in the house, and they bring that mold and mildew, dust mites, all these fine allergens that can thrive in a humid environment. That comes up into the house, and you can smell it. So that's the first thing. Other things are during the winter. Typically, a house on a dirt crawl space, the floor will be very cold. It's not always fun to live in a home with a crawl space that's not been insulated or encapsulated properly. So in the wintertime, you'll get those, freezing cold floors. You got to crank up your thermostat, run your furnace hotter and higher to try to compensate for that. So those are some of the signs that people can easily discern.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. All right, so since we're talking about the interior of the house, now we'll move on. Basement waterproofing, one of the services you mentioned. So when I think basement waterproofing, I usually think of like dry lock from my days at working in a hardware store, and a lot of people would buy that.
Oh, right, and, like put a coat of
exactly just
magic paint on the wall.
Exactly, and it forms this magic barrier. Keeps water out, keeps creeps.
Right.
So before we go to break, I'm gonna take a few minutes and let you tell us a little bit about the basement waterproofing service you offer.
Sure. Unfortunately, those types of do-it-yourself remedies are rarely effective, or at least they're not very durable. Water can get into a basement through a number of different areas, and the most common, though, is around the area where the concrete slab meets the foundation wall, so that joint between the wall and the slab. You get groundwater, pressing in through those cracks and through those voids there. That's the most common. It's not the only thing that can happen, but the most prevalent thing. And so you can imagine that, putting a coat of paint on the wall is not going to do anything to stop groundwater from seeping in beneath.
Right. If there's an issue, and this is what I always said to customers, hey, I'm just letting you know. Because we actually did test with it. Like we would put it on a cinder block, right? And then fill that cinder block with water. And it does keep it from penetrating through that area where the seal was, but the water has to go somewhere, correct?
Yeah, that's right. We're not saying that a coat of a product like that could not inhibit some water from coming through a wall, but what I am trying to say is that the more common source of water in a basement, you can get some through the wall, but more commonly it comes in from the ground underneath the slab.
Okay.
So, there are voids, there are expansion joints, there are cracks in the concrete, and they're big enough and they allow water through readily enough that a coat of paint is just simply not going to be effective. So what we do, very briefly, is to open up the perimeter of the floor and install a channel drain system beneath the slab, and we drain that to a sump pump. So now we can control where the water is going. Sometimes people think, well, gee, wouldn't it be better if we could stop the water on the outside before it ever penetrated inside? And yes, that's a nice thought,
right.
But the simple physics of the way that water behaves, tell us that water is going to get in at some point, get under the slab, and so what we can do is we can capture the water and control it, and keep it off the basement slab, away from carpets and other floor coverings and sheetrock and furnishings in the basement. We can control the water by draining it under the slab over to a sump pump.
Under to the sump pump. Okay, that makes sense. And again, it's resolving the problem, not just putting a Band-Aid over it, so to speak.
Right. And all these solutions that we're talking about, Calvin, are backed up by warranties, and so we're very confident in the systems that we install that they will perform as promised. Enough so that we put a lifetime warranty on these systems.
Okay, and a couple signs that people might notice.
Well, the basement waterproofing is it screams for attention when it happens. We've had quite a bit of rain this year, and if you're a homeowner and you've got a finished basement, you're going to know. I mean, if you go down there and that carpet's wet and sloshy under your feet, you'll typically very quickly get mold and mildew smells growing in a basement when water's been coming in that way. Sometimes, very, very pugnacious, almost overwhelming smells of mildew.
Mildew. Because some basements, because the air, if you don't use your basement and it's just for storage, let's say it's an unfinished basement. I mean, I know one sign if your sump pump's running all the time, but for somebody's that's not finding much water in there, and you have stagnant air in the basement, you don't go down there, so it does have that musty smell sometimes. But are you saying if it's truly like really pungent, or because I just want people to worry, like, oh, if they've got a little, I guess not mildew, but I call it musty or stagnant air smell.
Right. And of course, what many people are coming to realize now is that mildewy smells, what you're really smelling is mold spores. That's the smell that your nose discerns when there's mold, when there's mildew and mold in the air. You're breathing that in, and there have been some serious correlations between the health risks involved to live in a house where there's active mold or mildew present. It's no joke. I mean, some people have gotten deathly ill from from breathing in or being in that kind of environment for a period of time. So having a dry basement isn't just a nice idea or a good idea to be able to enjoy the space and not worry about your things getting ruined. It's a health issue as well.
Yeah, health hazard. Breathing in mold spores, definitely. Okay, well, let's take a quick break. Thank you for the info there, Paul. And as everybody knows, we do have our Ask an Expert series. So if you have any questions on any topics, you can email us at info@Home Sweet Home Colorado. And yes, any questions you have that maybe weren't answered during a show, we will get that to the expert and get it answered for you. And not only that, but it puts you in a drawing for a $25 gift card to home furnishing or home repair store of your choice. So please, if you have any questions for Paul, you can email those again to info@homesweethomecolorado.com. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more with Paul Sutton from Peak Structural.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to the Home Sweet Home Show after this short commercial break.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then call Page Publishing ASAP. We're looking for authors of all types of books. And unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review each and every book submitted to us. And we'll give you our feedback. And if we like what we read, we will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, Barnes & Noble, and other outlets. We handle everything. Editing, cover design, copyright protection, printing, publicity, and distribution. So if you've written a novel, children's book, cookbook, inspirational work, poetry, or a biography and want to get it published, call Page Publishing now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call.
Call now, 800-219-8262, 800-219-8262, 800-219-8262. That's 800-219-8262.
I was 35 when my life and addiction started to spiral out of control. My ex-husband threatened to take our children away from me. I felt hopeless. He called Elite Rehab Placement because I couldn't make the call. I was ashamed. I was given skills to manage my sadness and my anger, and more importantly, I'm 3.5 years sober. I'm so grateful for all their help. And all it took was making one phone call.
Elite Rehab can help you start to break your addiction problem and get sober in as little as 7 days. And we'll work with your insurance provider to help cover the costs. Plus, we have travel assistance programs to get you here by plane or train. Make this free call right now to learn more. 800-918-1376. 800-918-1376. 800-918-1376. That's 800-918-1376.
For more Home Sweet Home tips and ideas, be sure to like us on Facebook at the Home Sweet Home Show. And now back to the show.
And we are back. Welcome back, everybody. This is the Home Sweet Home Show. I am your host, Calvin Parker Jr. My guest, Paul Sutton with Peak Structural. Hey, Paul, thank you again for taking the time to do this and just helping, inform and educate everybody. We really do appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
All right, so we talked a little bit about basement waterproofing and crawl space repair. And again, guys, if you have questions, you can email those at info@homesweethomecolorado.com. And Paul, why don't you let them know where they can contact you directly as well before we get started?
Sure. Well, of course, the web is popular with just about everybody these days.
Yes.
We're real easy to find at peakstructural.com. Mm-hmm. And you can jump on our website and request a call back to schedule a free estimate if that's something that we can help with. And of course, you're more than welcome to just call in our office. The number here in Southern Colorado is 719-260-7070. And so that's an option as well.
That's an option as well. And although that is 719, so of course that's the Springs area. You guys do service most of the metro area, Denver, right?
We serve the entire metro area of Denver, and so our footprint, our service footprint, really goes from Longmont on the north side, all the way down to Trinidad and Southern Colorado. Yes, we're absolutely available throughout the area.
Just want to make people aware of that yeah, you guys have a big service area that you can help out.
Right.
And within that area, of course, there are a lot of older homes. So some of the next services we talk about here, foundation repair and that concrete leveling. So let's start with foundation repair. Let's talk
Sure.
a little bit about that. So I'm going to let you start.
Yeah, I'm happy to share a little bit about that. So here in Colorado, we've got some very unique geology. We've got some very active soils, and some of the very things that we all love about living here, enjoying the mountains and the climate and so forth, result in our neighborhoods being built on some ground that's, let's just say, less than consistently stable. So,
right.
Of course, older homes, that are 50, 60 years or more old, they may have structural problems because, those homes were built with fewer codes, lower standards. Builders could kind of do what they wanted, and over the many decades, those foundations can have problems and just kind of decline, with age.
Yeah.
So we definitely have some solutions for those older foundations. But even in the newer neighborhoods, it would be surprising probably for people to realize that sometimes, we're in doing repair work on homes that are as new as 10, 15, 20 years old. And so as the soils under and around a foundation move, sometimes in a drought they may shrink and kind of pull back from the foundation and take away the support that it needs.
Right.
Or during very wet seasons, sometimes that ground will heave and actually push the house around. And so there's a variety of reasons why foundation damage can happen. But all of them have bona fide, engineered, warranted solutions available. And that's what we really specialize in, and where we can help folks if they've got cracks showing up in brick or block or stucco areas of the home, sheetrock cracking, coming off of doors and windows. A lot of times if the foundation is shifting, you'll see diagonal cracking coming from the corners of openings like doors and windows. Those are some of the obvious visual signs that you might want to get it checked out.
Right. Yeah, I have a house we had bought back in 2008 in Thornton off 136th and Holly, which is close to Colorado, and we had it for about 7-8 years before we sold it. And even a newer home, I mean, they throw them up so fast, and I was noticing visually problems with the foundation, within 4th, 5th year, and that area, clay. Just I remember putting the yard in, the soil, my sod in, and really just hard impacted clay, I think it was. And man, I think by year number 4 or 5, I'm starting to see cracks in the foundation as it shifts, like you said, or shrinks, so to speak.
Right.
And seeing it pulling away.
Calvin,
go ahead.
You mentioned Thornton, Superior, Erie, on up into Thornton and Westminster, Boulder, all these areas. The area I'm describing has an especially concentrated level of expansive clay in the soils, and so those are some of the most challenging areas in the Denver metro area that we see a lot of foundation damage in day in and day out. It's unfortunately all too common.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And being a homeowner, not very familiar with.
Well, it doesn't seem like much,
right.
And if I ignore it, it may go away.
Exactly.
We don't say that, but sometimes we may think that or hope that. Right. And in reality, we've been doing this for 17 years now, Calvin, and we've seen that these problems never fix themselves. They don't get better on their own. They only get worse.
Yeah, makes sense. So for foundation repair, I guess what's the process for you guys?
Well, we've got a staff of trained structural evaluators. we call them design specialists, but they're extensively trained in being able to come into a property. They bring some engineering equipment with them and set up and provide the ability to read the home structurally and understand where, if movement is happening in the foundation and the structure, we can identify the area where that's occurring, and to what extent, to what degree of severity, and so forth. And then we can educate the homeowner about our findings. We can show them what's available in the marketplace in terms of options for repair. And if they do indeed have a real problem and are interested in seeing what it would take to take care of that problem, well, we can provide a written estimate, typically on the very first visit, right there on the spot.
Great. And last but not least, of course, we can talk, if you have those uneven joints, those trip hazards.
Right.
So
well, and of course, when we talk in this context, when we talk about concrete leveling, we're talking about slabs, not a concrete foundation. So we're talking about driveways, sidewalks, porches, patios. Could be a basement slab, anywhere, garage, anywhere you have a concrete slab. Those are usually the very first thing to move in a home, because compared to the weight of the foundation and the home itself, the slab doesn't weigh very much at all.
Right.
And so it's the very first thing to move if the ground is, beneath it is moving. And occasionally you'll get heave from tree roots and things like that, but more commonly, by far, is settlement. You'll have, say, one concrete panel in your driveway may gradually drop, a little bit, half inch, maybe more. And not only does it become an eyesore, it's anything but the curb appeal that you want to have at the front of your home and toward the neighborhood and the street. But it can become a safety issue because, we hear so many stories of, along the lines of, hey, we had Grandma came over at Thanksgiving last year and she tripped on this edge and fell, and I don't want that to happen. I don't want accidents like that. I don't, want anybody to get hurt. So there are those reasons as well to not ignore a problem like this. Besides the curb appeal and the aesthetic value that we're hoping, to maintain with our homes.
Right.
There are lots of reasons why people.
And that's an issue that's definitely just going to get worse. As the water gets in there, you got your freeze and thaw cycles.
Right.
As much rain, snow as we get, that's, to me, that just seems like a problem that you'd want to have corrected sooner than later.
Yeah, that's right. And if it is addressed in a timely way, folks can prevent having to tear out and replace the whole area. Which is what will happen eventually if it's ignored for too long.
You're looking
it can get damaged beyond the level that it can be repaired at, and then you're forced to write a really big check and just replace the whole thing.
Yeah. Now the process you guys use, because I think I saw a video on it. So can you tell me a little bit about how you...
Right. Sometimes people ask us, do you guys do mud jacking?
Yeah.
and that's the very first thing that comes to mind a lot of times. Mud jacking is a older technology that's been around for decades. There are lots of reasons why we don't offer mud jacking, and I won't take a bunch of time here to go into all of that. But there's a much newer, we consider much improved and superior technology of getting the result that people are after. And it's a product called PolyLevel. And PolyLevel is a polyurethane foam that we can inject down through very small holes in the slab, down into those void spaces that typically wind up, when the ground either settles and subsides naturally, or more commonly, it winds up washing out under the slab because you can get water moving, through those areas.
Right.
We're able to fill those voids with the PolyLevel. And then the PolyLevel is an expansive product, so we can actually lift the slab back to a flatter condition using that foam. That foam comes with a long-term warranty, which is something you don't get with mud jacking. It's a much cleaner, quicker process. You can actually pull into your driveway 15 minutes after we've raised the slab.
Wow.
So, mud jacking, they'll usually say, you need to stay off your driveway for a week or, whatever it is. So it's Polylevel is a newer product. We've been installing it for about 3 years now, with great success, and it's very popular. People, I mean, we are adding crews, adding trucks. There's just a lot of need out there in the community, and we're trying to help folks every way that we can.
Yeah, it's like I said, I've seen a video of it of the process, and again, instead of putting a Band-Aid, because there's those DIY projects or options you have out there where a lot of people will just get whether it's the caulking, the fill, the leveling, or just put a seal in there, foam pad in there, and seal over it, just hoping to correct the issue of water getting in there. But it doesn't really resolve the issue of actually leveling it out. So
that's true.
I think it's really cool and filling those areas. Now, when it's injected in there, if there still is movement in the soil, does it adjust? Like once it's expanding, it's done. It's done there. So if you have any more movement or after the fact, is it pliable?
Well,
does it move with it, or
sure.
How does that?
Sure. I mean, the Polylevel doesn't. It's not like it goes down 20 feet deep, like say a foundation pier would.
Right.
So it's possible to get movement, but that's where the warranty comes in. We've seen very little of that happening, down the road. And if a homeowner has us out to provide what we call our CPS, which is our concrete protection system, which stabilizes all the concrete on the exterior of the home, and a year later or 3 years later or whatever, they've discerned that something has moved as little as a quarter of an inch. That's where we would say, give us a call. We'll come back out. We'll straighten that out. We'll take care of that under warranty, and no muss, no fuss.
That's great. Hey, Paul, I appreciate you taking the time. Why don't you let everybody know one more time where they can contact Peak Structural, where they can give questions,
sure,
maybe set up a free estimate. Go ahead.
Yeah, again, I like to refer people to our website. It's really easy to find, peakstructural.com. Probably the most direct way to get to us, have somebody from our customer care team reach out in response to your inquiry and get an appointment scheduled.
And there's a lot of good info on your website as well, on your services.
Oh, yeah, we try. There's a lot of resource on there because we feel like a well-educated customer is our best customer.
Right.
So we're much like you do with your broadcast and podcast. We want to educate and inform people first and foremost.
Right. That's great. So yeah, definitely. Again, everybody, peakstructural.com, and then of course they can call you with questions, right?
Absolutely. That number is 719-260-7070.
7070. And again, although it's a 719 number, like we said earlier, they do offer their services across the greater Denver area. So, as Paul stated earlier, Longmont on down to Trinidad. So
that's right.
You have no problems with them getting him out to check out any issues you have. And again, appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today, Paul.
It's my pleasure.
All right. Well, again, if you guys have questions, you can email us at info@homesweethomecolorado.com. You can always go to peakstructural.com or contact them directly at 719-260-7070. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Glad to be here, Calvin.
Thanks. We'll be back with more after these messages.